The moment Elena Lambert stepped between the mob and the pale figure bleeding on the cobblestones, she knew her ordinary life had just ended forever. Torches blazed in the narrow alley behind the old theater district, casting wild shadows against brick walls that had witnessed a century of secrets. 20 angry humans pressed forward, their faces twisted with fear and rage, brandishing iron pipes, baseball bats, and makeshift wooden stakes. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she stretched her arms wide, making herself a human shield for the creature behind her. "Get out of the way," shouted Marcus Crane, the butcher from 3 blocks over. His meaty fists clutched a crowbar still dripping with dark blood. "That thing killed Danny. We all saw it." "You saw wrong." Elena's voice came out stronger than she felt. Behind her, she heard a wet, labored breathing that sounded far too human for comfort. "Danny was attacked by something else. I was there. I saw it happen." That was a lie. Elena had arrived only minutes after Danny's body had been discovered in the alley, his throat torn open, his eyes wide with final terror. But she had also seen the pale figure crumpled against the wall, surrounded by the mob, taking blow after blow without fighting back. She had seen his face, beautiful and terrible, carved from marble and moonlight. She had seen his eyes, the color of ancient silver, meeting hers for just one moment before another strike landed across his back. And in that moment, something fundamental had shifted in her universe. "Elena, move!" This was Patricia Winters, the schoolteacher who had taught Elena in 5th grade. Even she held a stake, her knuckles white around the rough wood. "That creature is dangerous. It's not human. It's a vampire." The word hung in the air like a curse. 6 months ago, the vampires had revealed themselves to the world, emerging from centuries of shadow into the harsh light of modern scrutiny. The revelation had torn society apart. Some called for coexistence, others for extermination. Laws were being debated, territories negotiated, but in the streets, old fears ruled. "If he's a vampire, then he deserves a trial, not a lynching," Elena said, though her voice shook now. "We have laws." "Laws," Marcus spat on the ground. "Those things are monsters, always have been. Danny's blood is still warm and you want to talk about laws?" The figure behind Elena stirred, and she felt a hand cold as winter frost close gently around her ankle. The touch sent electricity racing up her spine. A voice, cultured and rich despite its weakness, spoke from the shadows at her feet. "Little fool, you should not have done this." She didn't look down, couldn't afford to break eye contact with the mob. "Shut up and stay still." A sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough answered her. Marcus took a step forward, and the crowd surged with him. Elena felt her resolve waver. She was 23 years old, a graduate student studying medieval history at the university, armed with nothing but moral conviction and a stubborn streak her mother had always said would get her killed. Against 20 enraged neighbors, she would last approximately 3 seconds. Then sirens wailed in the distance. The mob hesitated. Elena seized the moment. "The police are coming. If you kill him now, you'll all be murderers. Is that what you want? To throw your lives away because you couldn't wait 5 minutes for justice?" She saw the calculation in their eyes, saw anger warring with self-preservation. The sirens grew louder. Marcus glared at her with something close to hatred. "This isn't over," he said. "That thing is a killer, and anyone who protects it is a traitor to humanity." The mob dispersed like smoke, melting into side streets and doorways seconds before 3 police cruisers screamed into the alley. Elena's knees nearly buckled with relief. She turned finally to look at the creature she had protected. He was trying to sit up and failing. His clothes, once fine, were torn and soaked with blood so dark it looked black in the firelight. His hair fell in silver-white waves past his shoulders, matted now with gore. His face was the most beautiful thing Elena had ever seen, all sharp, elegant angles and cold perfection, marred now by a split lip and a gash across one high cheekbone. But it was his eyes that held her, those impossible silver eyes that looked at her with an expression she couldn't name. "Why?" he asked simply. She had no answer. The police were approaching, hands on their weapons. Elena knelt beside him without thinking. "What's your name?" "Xandros." A pause. "Xandros Octavian." The surname hit her like a physical blow. Even she, who had made a point of not following vampire politics, knew that name. The Octavian line was one of the oldest vampire dynasties in Europe, and Xandros Octavian was not just any vampire, he was their king. Elena had protected a vampire king from a mob, and now she had approximately 30 seconds before the police decided whether she was a hostage, a collaborator, or an idiot. "Officers," she raised her hands, trying to look non-threatening. "This man needs medical attention. He's been assaulted." The lead officer, a stern woman with gray streaks in her dark hair, approached cautiously. Her nameplate read, "Sergeant Mora." "Step away from the vampire, miss." "He needs help." "We'll handle it. Step away." Elena looked down at Xandros. His eyes had closed, his breathing shallow. Dark veins stood out against the impossible pallor of his skin. She didn't know much about vampire physiology, but she knew injury when she saw it. He was dying. "He needs blood," she said. The knowledge came from somewhere instinctive. Vampires heal with blood. Sergeant Mora's expression didn't change. "Step away from the vampire. Last warning." Elena stood slowly, moving aside as two officers approached with silver-lined handcuffs. She watched them secure Xandros with more roughness than necessary, watched his head loll as they dragged him toward one of the cruisers. His eyes opened once, finding hers across the chaos, and she saw something that might have been gratitude or might have been a warning. Then he was gone, loaded into the back of a specially reinforced transport vehicle, and Elena was left standing in an alley that reeked of blood and fear, wondering what in God's name she had just done. Sergeant Mora approached her with a notepad. "I need your statement. Start from the beginning." Elena spent the next hour at the police station, telling her story again and again to increasingly skeptical officials. Yes, she had been in the area. No, she didn't know the vampire. Yes, she understood that a man was dead. No, she didn't see who killed him. The lies came easier than she expected. Some instinct told her that the truth of what she had seen in Xandros' eyes, the certainty that he was innocent, would sound like madness. They released her near midnight with warnings about interfering with vigilante justice and instructions not to leave the city. Elena walked home through streets that felt different now, more dangerous, shadows pressing in from all sides. She lived in a small apartment above a bookstore, 3 flights of narrow stairs that usually felt cozy, but tonight felt like climbing into a trap. She locked her door, checked the windows, and collapsed on her couch. Her hands were shaking. Adrenaline gave way to the delayed terror of what she had done, of how close she had come to being torn apart by people she had known her entire life. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion dragged her under like a tide. She woke to darkness and the certainty that she was not alone. Elena's hand fumbled for the lamp switch, but a voice from the shadows stopped her. "Don't. The light hurts." Her breath caught. She knew that voice, cultured and ancient. "How did you get in here?" "I'm a vampire, Miss Lambert. Locks are trivial." A pause. "And I needed to thank you." Her eyes were adjusting to the darkness now. She could make out a shape by the window, tall and still. "You should be in custody." "I was. I am not anymore." Xandros Octavian moved slightly, and moonlight caught his face. The wounds were gone, healed to flawless pale skin. He looked like a sculpture come to life, impossibly beautiful and utterly inhuman. They realized their error in attempting to hold a king. Political pressure was brought to bear. "I was released 2 hours ago." "Then why are you here?" "You put yourself between a mob and their target. You lied to the police for me. You risked everything for a creature you had never met." He tilted his head, studying her. "I want to know why." Elena sat up slowly, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. She felt vulnerable in her sleep clothes, facing a vampire king in her own living room. "I saw your eyes. You weren't fighting back. You could have torn through that mob like paper, but you were just taking the beating. That told me everything I needed to know. It told you I was weak. It told me you were innocent." Silence stretched between them. When Xandros spoke again, his voice was softer. "I did not kill that boy. I was hunting the thing that did. A rogue vampire, newly turned with no control. I tracked it to that alley, but I was too late. When the humans found me beside the body, they assumed the worst. Where's the rogue now?" "Dead. I killed it after I escaped custody." He moved closer, and Elena fought the urge to press back into the couch. "You saved my life tonight, Elena Lambert. By vampire law, I now owe you a debt, a life debt. I don't want anything. That is irrelevant. The debt exists." He crouched before her, bringing his face level with hers. His eyes caught the moonlight, glowing silver. "I am Xandros Octavian, king of the Northern Territories, lord of the Midnight Court. For the next 7 nights I am bound by blood and honor to serve as your protector. No harm will come to you, no enemy will reach you. I will be your shield against the darkness." Elena's mouth felt dry. 7 nights? The traditional period for a life debt of this magnitude. After that you may request a boon, any favor within my considerable power, and the debt will be settled. His lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. "I suspect you will need the protection. The mob tonight was only the beginning. You have marked yourself as a vampire sympathizer. There will be consequences." As if to punctuate his words, a brick shattered through her living room window. Xandros moved faster than thought, his body covering hers as glass rained down. Elena felt the impossible coldness of him, the supernatural strength in the arms that encircled her. Then he was at the broken window, looking down at the street below. "They're gone. Cowards always run." He turned back to her. "Pack a bag. You cannot stay here. I'm not leaving my home. Your home now has a broken window and an angry mob knows where you live." His voice was patient but firm. "Be reasonable." Elena stood, brushing glass from the blanket. Her heart was racing, but her mind was surprisingly clear. "If I run, it proves them right. It proves I have something to fear." "You do have something to fear. You have angry humans who see you as a traitor and rival vampire factions who will wonder why their king owes you a debt." Xandros moved toward her again, and this time she stood her ground. "I am offering you sanctuary, my protection. Come with me to the Midnight Court." "The Vampire Court? Absolutely not." "Why?" "Because I'm human, because I don't belong in your world, and I won't be dragged into vampire politics because I did the right thing." His eyes flashed with something that might have been anger or might have been admiration. "You are remarkably stubborn for someone whose window was just broken by people who want her dead." Stubbornness is a family trait. They stared at each other, locked in a battle of wills. Finally, Xandros sighed, a sound that seemed strange coming from a creature that didn't need to breathe. "Then I will stay here. Guard you in your home." "That's not necessary. The debt says otherwise." He moved to the broken window and with surprising gentleness began clearing the remaining glass from the frame. "Do you have materials to board this up?" Elena wanted to argue further, but exhaustion and shock were catching up with her. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the night was fading, leaving her hollow and shaking. She directed him to the small storage closet where she kept tools and spare wood from a shelving project she had never finished. She watched in fascination as Xandros, vampire king and ancient immortal, carefully measured and cut boards to cover her broken window. His movements were precise, economical, somehow elegant even in this mundane task. He worked in silence, and Elena found herself studying him in the darkness. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with the lean, muscular build of a predator. His silver-white hair caught what little light filtered through from the street, seeming to glow with its own luminescence. His skin was pale as fresh snow, and when he moved, there was an unnatural grace to it, as if gravity affected him differently. Everything about him screamed danger, otherness, but there was also something else. Something in the careful way he handled the tools, in the occasional glances he sent her way, that seemed almost protective. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "You're in my living room. I'm allowed to stare." "Fair enough." He drove another nail with a single perfect strike. "What do you do, Elena Lambert, besides rescuing vampire kings from mobs?" "I'm a graduate student, medieval history." "Ah, the irony." "What irony?" "You study my era, the time when my kind was young and the world was larger." He finished securing the last board and turned to face her. "What period specifically?" "Late medieval, mostly. The decline of feudalism, the rise of early modern thought, the intersection of old power structures and new ideas." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Why?" "Curiosity. I lived through those times. It would be interesting to hear how you interpret them." Elena felt a strange flutter in her chest. "You're over 500 years old?" "Older." I stopped counting centuries ago. He moved away from the window, surveying his work. The board will hold until morning. You should rest. I will keep watch. You're really going to stay here all night? All night, all day, all week if necessary. The debt demands it. He settled into the chair by the window, his posture somehow both relaxed and alert. Sleep. You are safe. Elena should have argued more, should have insisted he leave, should have called the police, should have done 100 reasonable things. Instead, she found herself climbing back onto the couch, pulling the blanket over her shoulders and letting her eyes drift closed. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Xandros, silhouetted against the boarded window, watching over her like some ancient guardian from the stories she studied. Morning came too quickly, bringing harsh sunlight that turned her living room into a crime scene of glass shards and splintered wood. Elena woke to find Xandros exactly where she had left him, though he had drawn the curtains and wrapped himself in shadows. Even in the dimness, she could see the tension in his frame, the pain that sunlight brought even through barriers. "You should have woken me," she said, sitting up, found somewhere darker to hide. "I have survived worse than filtered sunlight," but his voice was strained. "Is there a room without windows?" Elena led him to her small bathroom, the only completely interior space in her apartment. Xandros folded himself into the cramped space with surprising grace, settling on the closed toilet lid like a king on a throne. "This is undignified," he muttered. "You're a vampire hiding in a bathroom. Dignity left the building last night." Elena handed him a blanket. "Stay here. I need to clean up and figure out what happens next." She spent the next hour sweeping glass and fielding phone calls. Her mother, frantic with worry after seeing the news. Her advisor at the university, politely suggesting she take a leave of absence given the circumstances. Patricia Winters, of all people, calling to apologize for the mob and warn her that not everyone agreed with their actions, but that she should still be careful. By noon, Elena had a pile of broken glass, a boarded window, and a vampire king sleeping in her bathroom wrapped in a blanket printed with cartoon cats. Her life had officially become surreal. She made coffee and toast, then stood outside the bathroom door, uncertain. Did vampires sleep? Did they dream? Should she wake him? "I can hear you thinking through the door." Xandros' voice was clearer now, stronger. "The sun is past its zenith. I can emerge." He stepped out of the bathroom, and Elena nearly dropped her coffee. In the dim light of her apartment, Xandros Octavian was even more striking than she had realized. His features were sharp and aristocratic, his silver hair falling in soft waves that somehow looked artfully tousled rather than messy. His eyes, those impossible silver eyes, fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're staring again," he said, and this time there was amusement in his voice. "You look like you stepped out of a painting." "Several paintings, actually. I sat for Caravaggio once. Temperamental man, but talented." He moved past her into the kitchen, studying the coffee pot with interest. "I have not seen human food preparation in some time. May I watch?" The absurdity of it struck Elena suddenly, and she laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. "You're a vampire king watching me make toast. And you are a graduate student who lectures vampire kings about dignity." He pulled out a chair at her small kitchen table. "We are both living unusual lives at the moment. Might as well embrace the strangeness." Elena brought her coffee and toast to the table, sitting across from him. In daylight, or what passed for it in her curtained apartment, she could see the small details she had missed. The way his clothes, despite being torn and blood-stained last night, now seemed immaculate. The silver ring on his right hand, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. The small scar, faint as a whisper, that cut through his left eyebrow. "Vampires can scar?" she asked, touching her own eyebrow. "Old wounds from before the turning. The vampire who made me had a sense of humor. She kept the scars to remind me of mortality." His fingers traced the mark unconsciously. "I was a soldier when she found me, dying on a battlefield that no one remembers anymore. She saved you. She damned me, or blessed me. I have never decided which." He leaned back in the chair, studying her with that same unsettling intensity. "Tell me about yourself, Elena Lambert. What drives a woman to study dead centuries and rescue dying vampires?" Elena sipped her coffee, considering. "The centuries aren't dead. They're just sleeping. History is alive in everything we do, every structure we build, every choice we make. Understanding the past helps us understand the present. And the vampire rescue? I don't like bullies, and I don't like mobs. She met his eyes. I've studied enough history to know where mob justice leads, nowhere good. Something flickered across Xandros's face, an expression almost like pain. You're either very brave or very foolish. Can't I be both? Apparently. He stood, moving to the window and peering through a crack in the boards. Your neighbors are watching the building. 3 across the street, 2 in the alley. They are not being subtle. Elena felt cold despite the coffee warming her hands. What do they want? To see if I am here. To see if you are a traitor worth punishing. He turned back to her. They will escalate. Humans always do. The brick through your window was a warning. Next time it might be fire, or something worse. So what do? Hide forever? You accept my offer of sanctuary. Come to the midnight court where you will be protected. And become what? A vampire's pet? A trophy to show off? Anger flashed in his silver eyes. You would be a guest under royal protection, an honored position. No one would dare harm you. No one human, you mean. What about other vampires? They would dare even less. He moved closer, and Elena forced herself not to lean back. I am king, Elena. My word is absolute law in my territory. Under my protection, you would be safer than anywhere in the human world. But I'd be in your world, your territory, your control. Yes, he didn't deny it. Is that so terrible? To accept help when you need it? Elena set down her coffee cup carefully. I've spent my entire life being independent, making my own choices. I won't trade that for safety. Not even if independence means death? Not even then. They stared at each other across the small kitchen, 2 wills locked in opposition. Finally, Xandros exhaled slowly. You are the most infuriating human I have met in 3 centuries. I'll take that as a compliment. It was not meant as one. But there was something in his voice that suggested otherwise. Very well. If you will not come to the court, then I will stay here. But we need better defenses, and you need training. Training in what? How to survive in a world where you have made yourself a target. He glanced around the apartment. How long is your lease? Month to month. Why? Because this place is indefensible. Too many windows, too many entry points, and your neighbors already know you are here. He moved to the door, examining the lock with a critical eye. We need somewhere more secure. Somewhere I can protect properly. I can't just leave my home. Your home tried to kill you last night via thrown brick. That's not the home's fault. Xandros turned to look at her, and for the first time, she saw genuine exasperation on his face. Elena Lambert, you are brilliant and brave and stubborn to the point of suicide. But you are also in danger, and I am bound by honor and debt to keep you alive. So please, for the sake of my sanity and your safety, stop arguing and start thinking practically. The speech should have made her angry. Instead, she found herself smiling. You think I'm brilliant? That is what you took from that? It's the first compliment you've given me. I said you were brave as well, buried in a complaint about my stubbornness. Xandros stared at her for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He laughed. It was a rich, genuine sound, and it transformed his face from coldly beautiful to something warmer, more alive. Very well. You are brilliant, brave, and impossible. Better? Much? Elena stood, brushing toast crumbs from her shirt. Okay, you're right. I can't stay here, but I'm not going to the vampire court. Then where? Elena thought for a moment, then smiled. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. 2 hours later, they stood outside a modest house in the suburbs, 40 minutes from Elena's apartment. The house belonged to Margaret Lambert, Elena's grandmother, and it was perfect. 2 stories, reinforced construction from the 1940s, a basement that stayed dark all day, and a woman who had never met a problem she couldn't solve with determination and a wooden spoon. Your grandmother? Xandros looked doubtful. Trust me. Elena knocked on the door. Margaret Lambert opened it, took one look at her granddaughter and the impossibly pale man beside her, and said, You must be the vampire. Come in before the neighbors start talking. Elena had always loved her grandmother for her unflappable nature, but this exceeded all expectations. Within minutes, they were seated in a cozy living room that smelled of cinnamon and old books, drinking tea, in Elena's case, or sitting politely, in Xandros's case, while Margaret assessed the situation with sharp eyes. So you saved his life, made an enemy of your entire neighborhood, and now need a place to hide while you figure out what comes next. Margaret stirred her tea calmly. Does that sum it up? More or less, Elena admitted. And you, young man, are bound by some ancient vampire law to protect my granddaughter for a week. 7 nights, yes? Xandros sat with perfect posture, clearly uncertain how to handle this tiny elderly woman who treated him like a wayward grandson. I assure you, Mrs. Lambert, I will cause no trouble. My presence will not endanger you. Oh, I'm not worried about that. Margaret waved a hand dismissively. I'm more concerned about sleeping arrangements. I have a guest room for Elena, but you'll need the basement, I suppose. Can't have you bursting into flames in my guest room. The basement would be acceptable, thank you. Good. Now, let's talk about this debt situation. You're bound to protect Elena for a week, then she gets one favor, and you're free? That is the essence of it, yes. Margaret turned to Elena. What are you going to ask for? I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Well, start thinking. You've got a vampire king owing you a favor. That's not an opportunity that comes along often. Margaret stood, brushing invisible crumbs from her skirt. Now, I'll show you the basement. It's full of your grandfather's old things, but there's a cot down there, and no windows. Will that do? Xandros stood as well, his expression somewhere between confused and charmed. You are very accepting of this situation. Young man, I lived through the revelation. I watched vampires announce themselves on live television 6 months ago. I've had time to adjust. Margaret headed for the stairs. Besides, my granddaughter has always had good instincts about people. If she trusts you, that's good enough for me. As Margaret led Xandros down to the basement, Elena felt a tightness in her chest release. For the first time since last night, she felt almost safe. Her grandmother had that effect, making the impossible seem manageable through sheer force of will. The next few days fell into a strange rhythm. Elena spent her days in her grandmother's house, working on her thesis, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Xandros slept in the basement, emerging at dusk to patrol the perimeter and ensure no threats approached. Margaret cooked and asked questions and treated the entire situation with the same calm practicality she brought to everything. But beneath the routine, tension built. Elena couldn't ignore the way Xandros watched her, those silver eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She couldn't ignore the way her heart raced when he entered a room, or the way her thoughts kept drifting to him during the day. On the 4th night, she found him in the backyard, standing beneath an old oak tree, staring up at the stars. Do you miss it? She asked, stepping out onto the porch. The sun? Every day. He didn't look at her. It has been 300 years, and I still remember the warmth on my face, the way the world looked in daylight. That is the curse no one talks about. Not the blood hunger, not the violence, the loss of simple things like sunshine. Elena moved closer, drawn by the sadness in his voice. Is it worth it? Immortality in exchange for the sun? Sometimes, when the night is beautiful and the world is still, and I can hear the stars singing. He looked at her finally. And sometimes, like now, I wonder what I've become. A monster playing at kingship, bound by laws older than memory, unable to even save one innocent boy from a rogue's hunger. You're not a monster. How would you know? You've known me 4 days. I've studied history for years. I know monsters when I see them. You're not one. Elena sat on the porch steps, and after a moment, Xandros joined her. You're trying to build something, a society where vampires and humans can coexist. That's not monstrous. That's hopeful. Hope is dangerous. It makes you vulnerable. Everything worthwhile makes you vulnerable. That's the point. She glanced at him. Why did you really come to my apartment that first night? You could have sent someone else to fulfill the debt obligation. Xandros was quiet for a long moment. Because you stood between a mob and a monster, and you did not flinch. Because your first words to me were orders, not pleas. Because when I looked into your eyes, I saw something I have not seen in 3 centuries. What? Courage without cruelty. Strength without arrogance. He turned to face her fully. You remind me of who I was before the darkness took me. You remind me why I became king in the first place, to protect, not to rule, to serve, not to dominate. Elena felt her breath catch. They were sitting very close now, close enough that she could feel the coldness radiating from him, could see the inhuman beauty of his features rendered in starlight. Close enough that when he reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, she didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, cold as winter frost, gentle as falling snow. You are remarkable, Elena Lambert. You're not so bad yourself for a vampire king. He smiled, and it was like sunrise, brief and beautiful and gone too quickly. Your 7 nights are almost complete. Tomorrow night the debt ends. You must choose your boon. And if I don't want anything? The debt must be fulfilled. It is law. Elena looked at him, at this impossible creature who had turned her life upside down, who watched her with eyes like liquid silver, who had somehow become important to her in the span of days. An idea formed, reckless and terrifying and right. I want to go with you, to the midnight court, not as someone under protection, but as a guest. I want to see your world. Xandros' eyes widened. Elena, you said anything within your power. Is this within your power? Yes, but it is dangerous. The court is not kind to humans. There are vampires there who see your kind as nothing more than food and entertainment. Then you'll have to protect me. The debt will be fulfilled. I will no longer be bound. Then protect me anyway. Elena took his cold hand in hers. Show me your world, Xandros. Help me understand. He stared at their joined hands, then at her face. Whatever he saw there made him close his eyes briefly, as if in pain. You do not know what you are asking. Then show me. When he opened his eyes again, they glowed in the darkness. Very well. Tomorrow night, I will take you to the midnight court. But Elena, please understand. Once you enter that world, once you see what we truly are, there is no going back. You will be changed. Maybe I want to be changed. Maybe you should be careful what you wish for. But even as he said it, his hand tightened on hers, cold fingers interweaving with warm, and Elena knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The next evening, Elena stood in her grandmother's living room wearing the most formal dress she owned, a simple black number that suddenly felt inadequate for meeting vampire royalty. Xandros had disappeared at sunset to make preparations, leaving her with instructions to be ready by midnight. Margaret fussed over her, adjusting the dress, fixing her hair, trying not to look worried. You don't have to do this, her grandmother said quietly. You could stay here. Stay safe. I don't want safe. Not anymore. Elena met her grandmother's eyes in the mirror. Something is happening, Grandma. Between him and me. Something I don't understand but can't ignore. You're falling in love with him. The words hung in the air. Elena wanted to deny them, but couldn't. Is that crazy? To fall for someone in less than a week? Someone who isn't even human? Margaret smiled sadly. Your grandfather proposed to me after 3 days. When you know, you know. But sweetheart, he's a vampire, a king. His world is nothing like ours. I know. And you're going anyway. I have to. Margaret pulled her into a tight hug. Then be careful. Be smart. And remember, you always have a home here. At midnight exactly, a car pulled up outside. Not just any car, but a sleek black vehicle that looked like it cost more than Elena's entire education. Xandros stepped out, and Elena's breath caught. He wore formal attire, all black and silver, that made him look even more otherworldly. His silver hair was pulled back, revealing the sharp, elegant lines of his face. He moved with liquid grace up the walkway, and when he saw Elena, he stopped. You look beautiful. You clean up pretty well yourself. He offered his arm, formal and courtly. Are you certain about this? Too late to back out now. The drive to the midnight court took them deep beneath the city, through tunnels Elena hadn't known existed, into a subterranean world that stole her breath. The court was housed in an ancient structure, part Gothic cathedral, part medieval fortress, all vampire grandeur. Torches lined stone walls, casting dancing shadows. Tapestries older than America hung between carved pillars, and everywhere, vampires. They turned to watch as Xandros entered with Elena on his arm. She felt their eyes like physical touches, assessing, judging, hungry. Xandros's hand covered hers, a gesture both possessive and protective. "Stay close to me," he murmured. "Do not leave my side under any circumstances." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past rooms where vampires gathered in small groups, their pale faces turning to watch. Elena heard whispers in languages she didn't recognize, saw expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Finally, they emerged into a great hall that took her breath away. The throne room was massive, carved from living rock, with a ceiling that soared into shadow. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat a throne of black stone and silver, clearly meant for Xandros. But between them and the throne stood dozens of vampires, all dressed in formal finery, all watching with those unnaturally bright eyes. "My court," Xandros said quietly. "I must introduce you formally. It is protocol." He led her forward, and the crowd parted before them like water. Elena felt her heart hammering, but she kept her chin up, refusing to show fear. They reached the dais, and Xandros turned to face his people. "I present Elena Lambert, graduate student of history, savior of kings and honored guest of the Midnight Court. She is under my personal protection. Any who harm her will answer to me directly." His voice rang through the hall, absolute and commanding. Elena saw several vampires bow their heads in acknowledgement, but others looked less convinced. A woman stepped forward, her silver hair elaborating braided, her dress a deep crimson that matched her lips. "My king, forgive me, but this is unprecedented. A human guest, unbound and unprotected? She is a temptation, a risk." "She is under my protection, Serafina. That makes her safer than you." The threat was clear, and Serafina retreated, but not before shooting Elena a look of pure venom. The evening proceeded with a feast, though Elena was the only one eating food. The vampires drank blood from crystal goblets, elegant and disturbing in equal measure. Xandros sat beside her at the high table, his presence a constant reassurance, as vampire after vampire approached to greet the king and scrutinize his human guest. Elena fielded questions with surprising composure, drawing on her historical knowledge to converse about periods these vampires had actually lived through. She debated the fall of Constantinople with a vampire who had been there, discussed Renaissance art with one who had known Michelangelo, and carefully avoided discussing modern vampire-human relations with anyone. As the night wore on, she became aware of a growing tension in the hall. Vampires were clustering in small groups, whispering. Xandros noticed it too, his posture becoming more alert. "Something is wrong," he murmured. Before Elena could respond, the great doors burst open. A vampire staggered in, his clothes torn, his pale skin marred with burns. "My king! The eastern border is under attack. Rogue vampires, dozens of them, led by me." The voice came from the shadows near the door, and a figure stepped into the torchlight. He was tall and pale like all vampires, but where Xandros had an air of controlled power, this vampire radiated chaos. His smile was all fangs and madness. "Hello, cousin," the stranger said. "Did you really think you could build your precious peace without consequences?" Xandros stood slowly. "Constantine. You remember me. I'm touched." Constantine Octavian, for it could be no other, given the surname and the family resemblance, walked into the hall as if he owned it. "You've been busy, Xandros, making treaties with humans, playing at civilization, forgetting what we truly are. We are what we choose to be. No, we are predators, killers, gods walking among cattle." Constantine's eyes found Elena, and his smile widened. "And you brought a snack to court. How thoughtful." Xandros moved faster than Elena could track, placing himself between her and Constantine. "You will not touch her." "I don't need to touch her. My rogues are already in motion. By dawn, the city will be bathed in blood. Humans will remember what it means to fear vampires." Constantine spread his arms wide. "You wanted integration? I'm giving you war. Let's see which approach wins." "You're insane. I'm practical. You're trying to chain us to human laws, human morality. I'm setting us free." He looked around the hall at the gathered vampires. "Who stands with me? Who remembers the old ways when we were feared and worshipped, when we ruled the night without apology?" Several vampires moved forward, joining Constantine. Elena felt sick. This was a coup happening in real time. Xandros's voice rang out, cold and absolute. Any who follow Constantine into rebellion will be marked as traitors. You will be hunted. You will be destroyed. Choose now. More vampires moved forward, but many more stayed back. The hall was splitting, literally dividing into two groups. Xandros had the numbers, but Constantine had the element of surprise, and apparently an army of rogues already attacking the city above. Elena, Xandros said quietly, not taking his eyes off Constantine, you need to leave, now. I'm not leaving you. This is going to become violent very quickly. You cannot be here. I'm not leaving, she repeated stubbornly. Constantine laughed. Oh, she's spirited. I like that. Tell me, little human, what makes you think you belong in our world? Elena stepped out from behind Xandros before he could stop her. I stood between a mob and your king when they would have killed him. Where were you? Watching, waiting, wondering if the humans would do my work for me. Constantine's smile faded. But you interfered. You saved him, which means you're part of the problem. He moved, a blur of motion, claws extended. Elena froze, knowing she couldn't escape, couldn't even process his speed. But Xandros was faster, meeting Constantine mid-stride, and the two vampire royals collided with a sound like thunder. The hall erupted into chaos. Vampires fought vampires, loyalists against rebels, the throne room becoming a battlefield. Elena pressed back against the wall, trying to stay out of the way, watching in horror as Xandros and Constantine tore into each other with inhuman savagery. They were too fast to follow, too powerful to comprehend. Where they struck, stone cracked. Where their blood spilled, it hissed and steamed. Xandros fought with controlled precision, while Constantine was all wild fury, but they seemed evenly matched. Elena knew she should run, should escape while they were all distracted. But she couldn't tear her eyes away from Xandros, couldn't abandon him even if staying meant dying. A hand grabbed her arm, and she spun to find Serafina, the vampire woman from earlier, pulling her toward a side door. Come, the king ordered your protection. I will get you out. I can't leave him. You can and you will. You are human. You are vulnerable. You are a liability in this fight. Serafina's grip was iron. If Xandros falls because he is too busy protecting you, his death will be on your hands. Is that what you want? The words hit like a physical blow. Elena let herself be dragged through corridors, through chaos, through a court tearing itself apart. Behind them, she heard the sounds of battle, of screaming, of death. Serafina led her to a hidden exit, a tunnel that led up and out into the city. Go, run. If Xandros survives, he will find you. And if he doesn't, then you will live, which is more than you deserve for causing this. Serafina shoved her into the tunnel. Go! Elena ran. She ran through darkness, through tunnels that seemed to go on forever, her mind spinning. This was her fault. She had insisted on coming to the court, had insisted on seeing Xandros's world, and now that world was at war. Constantine was right, in a terrible way. She was a problem, a distraction, a weakness that could be exploited. She emerged into the city to find it burning. Fires raged in the streets, people screamed and ran, and everywhere vampires hunted. Constantine's rogues, dozens of them, were attacking indiscriminately. This was the war he had promised, the blood he had threatened. And it was happening because of her, because she had saved Xandros, because she had drawn attention to the possibility of human-vampire connection, because she had been arrogant enough to think she could bridge two worlds. Elena stumbled through the chaos, trying to help where she could, trying to make a difference. She pulled a child from a burning building, directed terrified humans toward safe areas, and tried not to think about what might be happening below in the midnight court. She tried not to think about silver eyes and cold hands and a voice saying, "You are remarkable." Dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of blood and ash. The attack stopped as the rogues retreated from the light, fleeing to whatever holes they had crawled from. The city looked like a war zone. Emergency services were overwhelmed. The human government was mobilizing the military. And Elena stood in the ruins of a coffee shop, covered in soot and blood that wasn't hers, wondering if Xandros was alive. She made her way back to her grandmother's house, moving through checkpoints and barricades. Margaret took one look at her and pulled her inside without a word, running a bath, making tea, asking no questions. Elena sat in the bathroom, letting hot water wash away the physical evidence of the night. But nothing could wash away the guilt, the fear, the terrible certainty that she had made everything worse. 3 days passed. The city was under martial law. Vampires were being rounded up indiscriminately, public opinion turning violently against them. The careful peace that Xandros had been building was shattered, and there was no word from the midnight court, no sign of Xandros. Elena tried to function normally, but everything felt hollow. She helped at emergency shelters, did what she could for the wounded, and tried not to let herself hope. On the 4th day, he came. Elena was in her grandmother's kitchen, helping prepare food for a shelter when she felt the temperature drop. She turned to find Xandros standing in the doorway, and her heart broke at the sight of him. He was wounded, badly. His clothes were torn and blood-stained, his pale skin marked with cuts that hadn't healed. He swayed on his feet, looking like death itself. Elena. Her name was a whisper. She ran to him, catching him as he fell, lowering them both to the floor. "Oh God, what happened? Where have you been?" "Fighting. Constantine escaped, but his forces are scattered. The court is secured. But the damage—" He coughed, and black blood stained his lips. "The damage is done. The humans will never trust us now. Everything I built is ashes. No, we can fix this. We can— You should not have come to the court." His silver eyes met hers, filled with pain. "Constantine was waiting for an excuse to move against me. Your presence gave him that excuse. He used you as a symbol of everything wrong with my rule." Elena felt tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have stayed away." "Yes." He reached up to touch her face, his hand shaking. "But I would not have wanted you to, selfish creature that I am. I wanted you there, wanted you in my world, and now look at the cost. Don't! Don't you dare die on me. I am immortal. I cannot die, but I can hurt. I can regret." His eyes were starting to close. "I need blood to heal, but I will not—" "Take mine." Elena didn't hesitate. She held her wrist to his mouth. "Drink, heal, whatever you need." "No, I will not make you a victim. You'll be making me a participant. There's a difference." She pressed her wrist against his lips. "Please, Xandros, let me help. Let me do something right." For a long moment he resisted. Then hunger and necessity won. His fangs, delicate as needles, pierced her skin. The sensation was strange, not pain exactly, but pressure and cold and something else, something that felt almost intimate. He drank, and Elena watched his wounds begin to close, watched color return to his pale skin. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt right, like some fundamental connection being forged between them. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were clearer, brighter. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Elena felt dizzy, but not weak, just strange. What happens now? "Now I must rebuild. The court is fractured. The humans are turning against us. Constantine is still out there, gathering forces." He sat up slowly, pulling her with him. "And you must stay away from me, for your own safety." "No. Elena, no." She gripped his hand. "We're past that. You drank my blood. You're in me now, and I'm in you. We're connected. Which is exactly why you must go. I am a target. Being near me will get you killed." "Then I'll risk it." She met his eyes. "I'm not running anymore. Not from this, not from you." Xandros stared at her, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked lost. "You are impossible. We've established this. You should be terrified of me." "I'm terrified for you. That's different." He pulled her close suddenly, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. "I cannot keep you safe, not from Constantine, not from my own people, not from the humans who now see you as a traitor. I cannot promise you anything but danger and difficulty." "Then don't promise me anything. Just let me stay." They held each other on the kitchen floor of her grandmother's house while the city burned outside and the future looked impossible. But in that moment, Elena felt more certain of anything than she had in her life. This was right. He was right. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Margaret found them like that, and simply stepped around them to continue preparing food, as if vampire kings embracing her granddaughter in her kitchen was a perfectly normal occurrence. "If you're staying for dinner, young man," she said without looking up, "you'll need to help set the table. We have standards in this house." Xandros looked at Elena, then at Margaret, then back at Elena. A smile, small and genuine, crossed his face. "Yes, madam." The next weeks were a blur of activity. Xandros moved between the midnight court and the human world, trying to salvage peace, even as Constantine launched guerrilla attacks designed to provoke human retaliation. Elena became his unofficial ambassador, speaking to human groups, giving interviews, trying to counter the narrative that all vampires were monsters. It was dangerous work. She received death threats daily. Marcus Crane and his followers tried to attack her twice, stopped only by vampire guards that Xandros insisted shadow her. But slowly, painfully, she began to make progress. Some humans listened, some were willing to see past the fear to the possibility of coexistence, and through it all, her connection with Xandros deepened. They spent hours talking about history he had lived through, about the future they were trying to build. He taught her about vampire culture, the complex web of laws and traditions that governed his people. She taught him about modern human society, the nuances he had missed in his centuries of isolation. They did not speak of the growing feeling between them. Both knew it was impossible. He was immortal, she was human. He was a king, she was a student. He existed in darkness, she belonged to the light. But the feeling grew anyway, undeniable and terrifying. 2 months after the attack, Elena was giving a speech at the university, trying to convince a hostile audience that peace was possible. The lecture hall was packed with angry students, skeptical professors, and a handful of vampire observers watching from the back. She stood at the podium, nervous but determined. "History shows us that every time humans have been confronted with something different, our first impulse is fear and violence. We feared people with different skin colors, different beliefs, different ways of loving. And every time, eventually, we learned better. We grew. We adapted. The vampire revelation is no different." "Vampires kill people," someone shouted from the audience. "So do humans," Elena countered. "We kill each other in wars, in crimes, in accidents. The capacity for violence does not define a species. The choice to control that violence does." "But they're not human." "No, they're not. They're something else, something other. And that scares us. But fear is not a valid reason for genocide." Elena gripped the podium. "I've met vampires. I've spoken with them, learned from them. And yes, some are monsters, but some humans are monsters too. The question is not whether vampires and humans are the same. The question is whether we can find a way to coexist despite our differences." The door at the back burst open. Elena's heart sank as she recognized Marcus Crane and a dozen of his followers, all armed with wooden stakes and righteous fury. "You want to talk about coexistence?" Marcus strode down the aisle. "Let's talk about the 50 people who died in the attacks 2 months ago. Let's talk about the children orphaned, the families destroyed. That's your coexistence." That was Constantine and his rogues, not Xandros, not the Midnight Court. All vampires are the same, monsters playing at being civilized. Marcus reached the stage. "And you're a traitor for protecting them." The vampire observers in the back stood, moving forward with predatory grace. The humans in the audience panicked, some fleeing, others grabbing improvised weapons. The situation was seconds from becoming a massacre. Elena did the only thing she could think of. She stepped in front of Marcus, placing herself between him and the advancing vampires. "Stop!" her voice echoed through the hall. "Everyone stop!" To her amazement, they did. The vampires froze. Marcus's followers hesitated. The entire hall held its breath. "This is exactly what Constantine wants," Elena said, her voice shaking but clear. "Human and vampire at each other's throats. Fear turning to violence, turning to retaliation in an endless cycle. If we do this, if we let ourselves become the monsters we accuse each other of being, then he wins. The extremists win. And everything we've worked for, everything we've suffered for, becomes meaningless." "You're naive," Marcus said, but there was less certainty in his voice. "Maybe. But I'd rather be naive and hopeful than cynical and violent." Elena looked around the hall, meeting as many eyes as she could. "We have a choice right now, in this moment. We can choose fear and death, or we can choose to be better, to try, to hope that maybe, just maybe, we can build something new." Silence stretched, long and terrible. Then one of the vampires in the back, a woman with silver hair and ancient eyes, nodded slowly and sat back down. One of Marcus's followers lowered his stake. The tension broke like a wave, and people began to disperse, shaken but alive. Marcus stared at Elena with something that might have been respect, or might have been disgust. Then he turned and left, his followers trailing behind. Elena's knees gave out. She sat down hard on the stage, shaking with reaction. The vampire woman approached, moving with careful slowness. That was either very brave or very stupid. I get that a lot. Elena looked up at her. Will there be retaliation? For Marcus and his people? No. You diffused it before blood was shed. We will report to the king that peace was maintained. The vampire tilted her head. He chose well in you. I'm not his. Are you certain? The vampire smiled, a flash of fangs. Blood knows blood, human. And you carry his mark, whether you acknowledge it or not. She left before Elena could ask what that meant. Elena returned to her grandmother's house that evening to find Xandros waiting in the living room. He stood when she entered, his expression unreadable. I heard about the university. Bad news travels fast. You put yourself in danger, again. He moved toward her. You seem to make a habit of standing between angry humans and vampires. It's becoming my specialty. Elena set down her bag. Your people said blood knows blood. What does that mean? Xandros went very still. Who said that? One of the vampire observers. She said I carry your mark. Elena, he ran a hand through his silver hair. When I drank from you, when you gave me your blood freely, it created a connection. Vampires can sense it. They know you are mine. Yours? Under my protection, bound to me by blood. He met her eyes. It is not ownership. It is like family, like belonging. Other vampires will smell me on you, taste me in your blood if they ever fed from you. It marks you as part of my line. Elena processed this. So I'm what? Adopted into the vampire royal family? In a manner of speaking, yes. And you didn't think to mention this? I did not think you would let me drink if you knew the consequences. He looked away. I should have told you. I should have refused. But I was weak and wounded, and you were offering yourself so freely. I took advantage. You saved yourself from dying. I bound you to me without your consent. That is unforgivable. Elena was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she stepped closer to him, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his skin. What if I don't want to be unbound? His eyes snapped to hers. Elena, what if I like being connected to you? What if I want to be part of your world, your life, your everything? She reached up to touch his face, her warm hand against his cold skin. What if I'm in love with you? Xandros closed his eyes as if in pain. You cannot be. Too late. I'm a vampire, a king, an immortal. You are human. You will age and die while I remain unchanged. A relationship between us is impossible. You're right. It's impossible and ridiculous and completely illogical. Elena smiled through sudden tears. And I don't care. You should care. You should run from me. You should choose a normal life with a human partner, children, sunlight, all the things I can never give you. I don't want normal. I want you. Xandros opened his eyes, and they were blazing with emotion, all his careful control cracking. If I allow myself to love you, if I let this happen, I will destroy you. My world will swallow you whole. You will lose everything human about yourself. Then we'll figure it out together. She rose on her toes, bringing her face close to his. Stop trying to protect me from yourself. I'm a grown woman making a choice. Let me make it. For a long moment he simply stared at her. Then, with a sound that was half growl, half surrender, he kissed her. It was nothing like the romantic kisses Elena had imagined. It was cold and fierce and desperate, his hands gripping her waist like he was drowning and she was air. She kissed him back with equal desperation, pouring months of fear and longing and love into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both were shaking. This is a terrible idea, Xandros murmured against her lips. The best ones usually are. I will probably get you killed. I'll try to avoid that. And I cannot offer you a normal future. No wedding in daylight, no children, no growing old together. Then offer me an abnormal future. Offer me vampires and moonlight and immortal love. Elena met his silver eyes. Offer me you. He kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise. I offer you everything I am, everything I have, my kingdom, my protection, my heart such as it is. If you will have me, I will. They held each other in the darkened living room, while outside the city went about its business, unaware that a vampire king and a human woman had just decided to rewrite the rules of what was possible. Margaret found them like that, and simply smiled. Finally, she muttered, I was beginning to think you'd both be stubborn forever. The next months were not easy. Constantine continued his attacks, though less frequently as Xandros hunted down his supporters. Human extremists targeted Elena repeatedly, forcing Xandros to assign permanent guards. The vampire court was split on their king's relationship with a human, some seeing it as weakness, others as a bold statement of unity. But through it all, Elena and Xandros built something real. She moved into the Midnight Court, claiming a suite that connected to his, learning to navigate vampire politics with the same skill she applied to historical research. He made concessions to the human world, appearing at peace summits, negotiating treaties, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. They faced opposition from all sides. Serafina continued to make snide comments about human fragility. Marcus Crane launched a protest movement calling for Elena's arrest as a collaborator. Elena's own parents, shocked by her choices, cut off contact for months before Margaret talked sense into them. But they also had supporters. Margaret, of course, who treated Xandros like the grandson she had never had. Some of Xandros's inner circle, who saw Elena's influence making their king more approachable, more human. And slowly, gradually, portions of both human and vampire communities who saw their relationship as a symbol of what coexistence could look like. 1 year after that first night in the alley, Elena and Xandros stood on the balcony of the Midnight Court, looking out over a city that was slowly healing. Do you regret it? Xandros asked quietly. Giving up your human life for this? Elena leaned against him, warm against cold. I didn't give it up. I expanded it. I'm still me, still human, just with a vampire king attached. Attached? What a romantic description. Would you prefer madly in love with? Much better. He pulled her closer. I have something for you. He handed her a small box. Inside was a ring, silver and ancient, carved with symbols Elena had come to recognize as vampire royal insignia. Xandros. Vampires do not marry as humans do, but we bond. Blood bonds, soul bonds, recognized by our laws and traditions. He took the ring from the box. This belonged to my mother before she was turned. She gave it to me on her deathbed and told me to give it to someone worthy, someone who understood both worlds. I don't know what to say. Say yes, be my bondmate, not human, not vampire, but something new, something neither of our peoples have seen before. Elena looked at the ring, at Xandros, at the city spread below them. A year ago, she had been a simple graduate student. Now she was in love with a vampire king and being offered a place in immortal history. It should have been a difficult choice. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, cold silver against warm skin. Then he kissed her, and Elena felt the bond snap into place, a connection deeper than blood, deeper than words. She felt his emotions, his love, his eternal commitment, and she knew he felt hers in return. What happens now? She asked when they broke apart. Now we figure out how to make this work, how to build a world where moments like this are normal instead of revolutionary. Xandros smiled. Together. Together, Elena agreed. They stood on the balcony as night deepened, vampire and human, king and student, immortal and mortal, bound together by love and choice and the stubborn belief that the impossible was just another challenge to overcome. Below, the city slept, unaware that above them, two people were rewriting the rules of what love could be. 6 months later, Constantine made his final play. He attacked during a peace summit, bringing a small army of rogues and human extremists he had somehow united under a banner of mutual hatred. The battle was fierce and terrible, fought in the streets and in the shadows, vampire against vampire, human against human, chaos against order. Elena fought too, armed with knowledge and strategy rather than weapons. She coordinated evacuations, directed emergency services, and used her position as Xandros' bondmate to rally both human and vampire allies to the defense. The battle raged for 3 days. In the end, it was a coalition of humans and vampires working together that drove Constantine back. And it was Xandros, fueled by love and determination, who finally cornered his cousin in the ruins of an old church. Elena was there when the final confrontation happened. She had insisted, despite Xandros' protests. She watched as the two ancient vampires faced each other across broken stone and shattered glass. "You've already lost, Constantine," Xandros said. "Look around. Humans and vampires fighting together. Your vision of eternal conflict is dead." "No, it's just beginning." Constantine lunged. The fight was brutal and brief. Xandros was stronger, faster, fueled by something Constantine had never understood. Not just blood and power, but love, connection, hope. When it ended, Constantine was dust, and Xandros stood victorious, bloodied but alive. Elena ran to him, and he caught her, holding her close. Around them, the last of the rebels surrendered. The war was over. The peace that followed was hard-won and fragile. There were still extremists on both sides, still people who would never accept coexistence. But there were also more and more who saw Elena and Xandros and believed that maybe, just maybe, a new world was possible. Elena finished her graduate degree and became an official ambassador between the human government and the vampire courts. Xandros implemented reforms that gave vampires who wanted integration more freedoms while respecting those who preferred tradition. Together, they built bridges where before there had been only walls. 2 years after that first night in the alley, they stood in the great hall of the Midnight Court for a ceremony unlike any in vampire history. A bonding ceremony open to both humans and vampires, where Elena Lambert would be formally recognized not just as bondmate to the king, but as co-ruler of the Midnight Court. The hall was packed. Vampires in their finery stood beside humans in formal wear. Margaret sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Even Elena's parents had come, still uncertain but present. Xandros stood at the altar in silver and black, looking like something out of a fairy tale. When Elena walked down the aisle toward him, his expression transformed into pure joy. They spoke vows in both human and vampire languages, binding themselves not just by blood but by choice, not just by law but by love. When Xandros kissed her, the hall erupted in applause from human and vampire alike. As they turned to face their people, Elena felt the weight of what they had accomplished. Not just their love, but the world they had begun to build around it. A world where difference was not something to fear, but something to celebrate. Where vampire and human could stand side by side, not as enemies but as partners. That night, alone in their chambers, Xandros held Elena close and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For standing between me and that mob, for refusing to let them take me, for seeing past what I am to who I am." He kissed her softly. "For loving me when you had every reason not to." "I didn't have a choice," Elena said. "From the moment I saw your eyes, I was lost. Then we are lost together." They made love as the night deepened, warm and cold intertwined, mortal and immortal, human and vampire. And when Elena finally fell asleep in Xandros' arms, she dreamed of a future that seemed impossible but felt inevitable. Years passed. Elena aged slowly, her life extended by the blood bond she shared with Xandros, though she remained fundamentally human. They faced challenges together, political and personal. There were setbacks and victories, moments of despair and moments of triumph. But through it all, they remained constant, vampire and human, king and ambassador, bondmates and partners and lovers. Elena never regretted that moment in the alley when she had stepped between an angry mob and a wounded vampire king. That moment had been the beginning of everything, the choice that had changed her life and the world. Some nights, when the weight of responsibility felt too heavy, she would ask Xandros if it was all worth it. The danger, the opposition, the constant struggle. And he would smile. that soft, genuine smile that was hers alone, and say, "Every moment, every sacrifice, every battle, all of it is worth it for this, for you, for us." And Elena would believe him because she felt the same way. They had chosen an impossible love and made it real. They had stood against hatred and fear and built something beautiful in its place. They had proved that even the deepest divides could be bridged by courage, compassion, and stubborn hope. The Midnight Court flourished under their joint rule, becoming a beacon of what coexistence could achieve. Other vampire kingdoms followed their example. Human governments adapted their laws. Slowly, painfully, the world changed. And at the center of it all were two people who had met in violence and found love, who had faced impossible odds and chosen each other anyway, who had looked at a world divided and decided to unite it. Elena Lambert and Xandros Octavian, human and vampire, mortal and immortal, had become the symbol of everything the new world could be. On their 10th anniversary, they stood once again on the balcony of the Midnight Court, looking out over a city that now felt like home to both species. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" Xandros asked. "If you had just kept walking past the mob?" "Every day," Elena admitted, "and every day I'm grateful I didn't." "As am I." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You are my heart, Elena, my light in the darkness, my reason for everything. You're getting sentimental in your old age." "I am ancient. I'm a loud sentiment." Elena laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. Then she turned in his arms, looking up at the vampire king she loved more than anything. "Promise me something." "Anything. Promise me that no matter how long we have, whether it's 10 years or 100 or 1,000, we'll always remember this. The choice we made, the love we built, the world we changed." Xandros cupped her face in his cold hands, his silver eyes glowing with emotion. "I promise. And I promise that even when you are gone, when mortality finally claims you and I am left to face eternity alone, I will carry you with me. Your courage, your compassion, your stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. You will live forever in me." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "That's the most romantic and depressing thing you've ever said." "I contain multitudes." They kissed as the moon rose over the city, vampire and human, forever bound by love and blood and choice. Elena knew that their time together was limited by her mortality, but she also knew that what they had built would outlast both of them. The bridges between species, the laws protecting both humans and vampires, the hope that coexistence was not just possible but preferable. That was their legacy. Not just their love, but the world they had shaped around it. And if Elena's life was shorter than Xandros's eternity, well, she would make sure every moment counted. She would fill her years with love and purpose and joy. She would stand beside her vampire king and help him build a better world. She would live without regret. Because on that night in the alley, when she had stepped between an angry mob and a wounded vampire king, refusing to let them take him, she had not just saved a life. She had found her destiny, and it had been worth everything.